Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. 18 members of our congregation returned home yesterday morning very early, tired in their eyes, tired in their body, and spent emotionally from an incredibly meaningful week in Israel. During that time, we did a lot of things that I call input and output. Input to the Israelis to let them know that they're not alone, that we're standing with them, that we love them, and that people like our community and communities around the globe are with them during this dark hour. And output that Israelis gave to us about their emotions, their feelings, the roller coaster of what has been the last 2 months in Israel. Our group of 18 has selected 2 members from the group to share some reflections with our community today about their experiences. And they're just beginning, all of us are just beginning this long process of digesting what we saw. But they're going to begin that process with us as a community today. So it is my delight and my honor and my privilege to invite forward today Dr. Wendy Hurst Levine and Gabriel, who will share those thoughts and reflections this Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. 3 days ago, as I stood in the middle of the home of a stranger 6,000 miles away, what struck me were the cribs. We were in Kfar Aza, one of the kibbutzim near Gaza hardest hit by Hamas on October 7th. As we walked around the kibbutz, it was completely quiet, save the sounds of the bullet casings crackling beneath our feet and the hum of an Apache helicopter hovering overhead and firing AGM-114 missiles into Gaza a few hundred yards away. It was also eerily empty until we ran into a young woman who was inspecting the little that was left of her family's home and invited us in. Next thing I knew, I was standing next to the cribs of the 10-month-old twins who'd lived there, Roy and Guy. Having spent my career as an OBGYN in Englewood, I have always been drawn to babies, and that's why I was so taken with these cribs. The woman showing us around the house, who is the twins' aunt, told us that as terrorists attacked Kfar Aza the morning of the 7th, her sister Hadar, the twins' mother, had slipped into the kitchen to try to grab a bottle for her boys. This is where they found my sister's body, she told us as we walked through the kitchen. And this is where the baby's father was, she said, in the nursery, pointing to the small patch of floor where his body was found. The walls of the nursery were pierced with hundreds of bullets, and as the babies cried and screamed that day, 14 of their neighbors ran outside toward the house to try to save them. All 14 were killed. But somehow, with the way the cribs were positioned, by a mere matter of inches, these twins survived. The babies and their cribs were not the only signs of life that endured. There was the row of colorful children's bicycles in front of a house, destroyed beyond recognition. The soaps and body creams in the window of a bathroom blown to smithereens. The vinyl record inscribed with the word harmony hanging untouched outside the entrance of a shattered home. The purple sheet that an IDF soldier warned us not to step on because it was still full of blood. The pile of kites that were meant to be used that day in Kfar Aza's annual kite festival. And finally, a sukkah, perfectly intact, surrounded by lush and fragrant lemon trees and hundreds of bullet holes. There was peace juxtaposed with violence, but we saw so many tiny signs of hope, so much beauty in the darkness. And looking back on our trip, it's clear that is the same beauty Israel is finding in the darkness, and the same beauty that Jews around the world are finding in the darkness. Still, I showed up at Newark last weekend with an enormous pit in my stomach, a bit anxious to go on this trip in the first place, only then to be interrogated by the LL attendant at check-in. Where did you go to Hebrew school? Do you speak, read, or write Hebrew? When was your bat mitzvah? Do you know the dates of the high holidays this year? For whatever reason, it was that moment when my dread dissipated, and I felt immensely proud to be a Jew en route to Israel. Our stated goal for the trip was to volunteer, to show solidarity, and to bear witness. But what I'd soon learn is that we'd accomplish this, and we'd take away from the mission so much more, and we would exceed all of that. As we were walking out of Kfar Aza, we ran into a group of soldiers from a secret elite counterterrorism unit, one of whom told us, "We all went to Poland, but now we should be bringing our children here." Their directive was clear. Don't be tourists here, be witnesses. Give and share testimony. Make a difference by telling our story over and over and over again. We then made our way to dinner at an army base near the Gaza border from which the IDF operates the Iron Dome. We met with a small group of young women who maintained the Iron Dome battery. We broke bread with soldiers. We saw a giant menorah they constructed out of weapon shells. And finally, we cried together as we stood in a circle, arm in arm, singing Hatikva. After a difficult day, I felt good, knowing that I'd done what we set out to do: volunteer, show solidarity, and bear witness. But then, as we were leaving, a male soldier asked me for one very simple, very easy favor. Can I have a hug? Can I have a hug? We embraced longer than I'd ever hugged a stranger, and I knew I'd done far more than I ever could with words or donations or a retweet or a hashtag or an Instagram post. So I just kept giving hugs. We all did. We hugged soldiers. We hugged survivors. We hugged family members of hostages. We hugged refugees as we lit candles with them on the first night of Hanukkah. I even hugged a religious man who wouldn't typically hug a woman other than his wife. And that was the first, but not the last time I cried on the trip. Yossi, the religious man I met at a rehab facility for wounded soldiers, had been shot and left for dead, bleeding out profusely. I spoke to Hashem and repeated the Shema, Yossi told me. Hashem sent me 3 angels, the soldiers who found me and brought me to the hospital and saved my life. But he wasn't grieving for himself. He was grieving for his wife and 4 children. He said they didn't deserve all of this because all his wife ever did were mitzvot. Shortly after our hug, he was getting ready to leave the rehab center to attend his daughter's bat mitzvah. Aside from Yossi, I didn't even know the names of the people I was hugging, but each one felt better than the next. And that's how I knew the trip was about so much more than I'd realized at the outset. And it wasn't just who we came to see, it was whom we came to see it with. Over long bus rides and a glass of wine at the end of a challenging day, I built deep and instant bonds with members of our congregation I've been sitting across the aisle from for years, but who I never knew. The people of Israel have fresh wounds in need of healing, fresh scars visible on their bodies, but invisible on their hearts and minds. The granddaughter of Ariel Sharon told us Israelis are so angry at their government. Others spoke of the unprecedented moral dilemma Israel faces in eliminating evil. A former head of the National Public Diplomacy told us Israelis are so fearful that Jews around the world are growing too detached from their Jewish roots, demanding we all do more than simply wielding our checkbooks. And the families at the Center for Hostages in Tel Aviv told us all they want us to do is show up as they continue to navigate the unthinkable. It was there that we also met Dvir Rosenfeld, a survivor from Kfar Aza, who coincidentally is the uncle of those twin baby boys whose crimes I stumbled upon and who lost their parents. When we asked what we could do to help his family, he said, "Just come to visit us. Stay with us. Just be and listen and hug." So let's get over there and do just that. Numerous people we met along the way told our group that we were crazy and not normal for choosing to come into a country amid a war when everyone else was running away. If that's what it means to be crazy or abnormal, I wouldn't have it any other way. And to those worried about the things you may see while in Israel that you can't unsee, maybe that's not such a bad thing. To steal a line from our rabbi, when you pour hot oil on a Jew in Morocco, a Jew in France screams. Well, now I'm confident it goes the same way with love as it does with pain. When Jews in Israel can feel love and find hope and see light, we all can. I certainly returned from our trip full of all three, and thanks to David, I also returned with a stash of rugelach in my suitcase, violating U.S. laws by lying to airport security that no, I was not smuggling a smorgasbord of Jewish pastries in my bag. Hours before we headed to the airport to catch our flight back to New York, we made a quick stop at the hotel. I had so many things to pray for this year, and I felt that God was listening more than any other time I'd gone. I also met up with an old friend whose 5 kids I delivered before they made Aliyah. He showed me something special I'd never seen before. Each house in the old winding alleyways of Jerusalem had little glass boxes outside their front doors, set into the Jerusalem stone. Each night of Hanukkah, they would put their Hanukkahs outside in these boxes to shine their light on the world. In our own country, where nowadays we're often afraid even to reveal to people that we're Jewish, I can only hope that we can take a page out of Israel's book to shine our Judaism loud and proud, whether it's the third night of Hanukkah or any other night of the year. Chag Sameach, and let's burn those candles as bright as we can and use them to find beauty in the darkness.
Wow. Normally, the follow-up or the, what would you say, the final hitter, maybe of the inning, I don't mind being that, but that is really hard to follow up on. So I'm probably the most unlikely attendee of the trip to Israel. It's been a embarrassingly long 39 years since I've been there. I had a lot of excuses along the way. Very busy at work, children that needed attention, just life got in the way. But for whatever reason, when the opportunity to go came up, I said yes quickly. I think what struck me, what Wendy said was unbelievable, and there's no way that I could address as eloquently as she did many of the things that we saw. But what really hit me was the enormity of the challenges that Israel faces at the moment. The divergence of media and the reality on the ground. And there's really a lot to say about that, but we have limited time. I grew up in Horizon House in Fort Lee. Probably some people around here know where that is. Building I was in, One Horizon Road, had a place down in the basement. It said Fallout Shelter. I think it was, I'm colorblind, but it was black and orange. We never had to think about it, but for the fact that when we went to the garage, I saw the sign that was sitting there. Buildings were built 60 years ago. In Israel, most standing structures have what they call safe rooms. These safe rooms are effectively bomb shelters. They're bomb shelters in every house, every office, every place of business, pretty much everywhere you go. The daily existence of folks on the ground in Israel is one of rockets flying overhead, the crackling of the Iron Dome saving the citizens from 90 to 95% of those rockets that are a daily occurrence, basically, for all Israelis. For me, I felt safe the whole time I was there. It was crazy. We were down, and Wendy said we were down in the southern part of Israel on the border of Gaza. Shells going off, our shells, thankfully, in the direction of Gaza. Loud noises. Bonnie took it. You know, she reacted when those went off. We all did. We kind of got used to it after a while, but I felt safe there. What was amazing is that even though we had the horrors of October the 7th, the hostage nightmare that continues on, what we got back from the people that we saw on the ground in Israel, most of the folks that we saw, in fairness, were Jewish, but we went to that army base and I said, what's that flag flying up there? And it was a Druze flag. Somebody had to explain to me why that would be on the army base, is because they fight like heck side by side with Jews. I was like, well, that's phenomenal. Everybody that we bumped into was unified, had a sense of purpose, they were strong, and they were amazingly hopeful. Stunning, absolutely stunning to see that in the face of what was some very harsh realities that were on the ground. So what does Israel really look like right now? When we landed at the airport, what it looked like to me was COVID 2.0. Empty, dead empty. We looked the runway, quiet when we landed. You could see there were no planes up to any of the jetways. When you walked through the airport, silence pretty much as we went there. So what is the state of Israel dealing with right now in their COVID 2.0? Shops are quiet or closed. Labor is a major challenge. We think about our COVID here and the world experienced. In Israel, everyone knows that folks are in the army, right? They get called up in times of war. And they were called up in mass for what happened. So employees can't get workers. Hospitals have nurses that are going into battle and can't help to effectuate services that need to be done, that need to be executed. There's displacement both in the north and the south of hundreds of thousands of Israelis. Folks don't hear that. That's not in the media. That's not the message that people are getting around the world of what's going on the ground there. So what we have is a bit of a PR issue amongst us in America and around the world. And it's going to be incumbent upon us to help craft and create the real message that has been going on for probably centuries as it relates to our people. I wanted to thank the people that came to me, which was stunning for the folks that I traveled with and a lot of the people that are here that are regulars. Those that have been engaged pre-October 7th, thank you. There are so many folks that have been living what I'll call the bubble of the United States. They've been drinking from what I'll call the punch bowl of prosperity and have probably forgotten the risks that exist to us as Jews, both here and around the world. As that fella Gotti said to us, the Zionism project, as he referred to it as in our meeting at J2 or J squared, I confuse them, I'm a little dyslexic, is something that we all need to pay attention to. So what I thought of after October 7th is, and as it related to this trip, if not now, then when? There are many folks that have been doing a lot after the earthquake of October 7th. For those, thank you. There are so many that could be doing more. Many folks have what I'll say economic challenges in terms of giving. Completely understandable. Other folks are busy. Make time to get involved, to do something. It might be reaching out to somebody in Israel. All they wanted to, they were thanking us. Folks on the ground, like look, kids my age that are manning the Iron Dome, that are going out to battle with machine guns over their shoulders, pistols on their hips. And we sit here, cloaked in the security of our surrounds in this beautiful building, living, again, in the bubble. For those who don't have the economics to help in that way, there's a ton that can be done, visiting or helping or otherwise. For those of us who have spent the last decades, and this is self-reflection, spent the last decades collecting things, watches, cars, houses, taking vacations and we should all take vacations, by the way, they're great things to do, taking vacations that probably cost more than the average income of an Israeli if they were able to work right now, if they weren't displaced, if they weren't in the service at the moment. For those of us that can do, let's do the following. Let's wake up and step up. Because if not now, then when? Thank you.
On behalf of our whole congregation and all of us who are in Israel, we say Yasher Koach and thank you, Wendy and Gary, not only for your words, but for your leadership. We all need to step up.